So we'll see. So today's daf is Kuf Nun Aleph. We're going to start Kuf Nun Amud Bet, bottom of the page, 2 lines up from the bottom, where it says Abba Shaul. So in the Mishnah, is this basically speaking about, at the conclusion, we're getting close to the conclusion of Masekhet Shabbat, and one of the subjects that it's talking about is some of the rabbinic prohibitions on things like speaking about business, hiring workers, and something called Mahashich ala Techum. Mahashich ala Techum means going to the edge of the Techum. The Techum is the boundary that you can't pass. 2,000 amot outside of the inhabited area, you're not allowed to go on Shabbat. This is an Isur D'Rabbanan. It's a rabbinic prohibition. The Rambam says that if it's that really there is a concept of Techumin even min Torah, but it's much further than 2,000 amot. The 2,000 amot is D'Rabbanan, but that's a discussion among the Rishonim. The point is, the question is, can you be machashich, which means can you go to the edge of the Techum and wait? Machashich means you're going to wait for nightfall. So walking to the edge of the Techum, are you violating Shabbat? No, as long as you don't go out of the Techum. So let's say I need to go to a party Saturday night. I want to get a head start. So I walk to the edge of the Techum and I sit there until Shabbat is over. So as soon as Shabbat is over, I can run the rest of the way. Is there a problem? So this is the issue that the Mishnah talked about. And the Mishnah said you can't go to the edge of the Techum to do something that you wouldn't be allowed to do on Shabbat itself. But you can go to the edge of the Techum if the reason why you want to pass the Techum is to do something that you could do on Shabbat. So for instance, it said that if you want to go to the edge of the Techum in order to hire workers, you can't do it. But if you go to the edge of the Techum and wait there because you want right after Shabbat to go check on your perot, to go check on your fields, that's okay, because if the field was within the boundary, you'd be able to walk by on Shabbat. You can walk by. So, therefore you can do it. And then Abba Shaul said at the end of the Mishnah, Kalal Amar Abba Shaul said the following general principle, that was, Kol Shezakai, Kol Shani Zakai Ba'mirato Rashay Ani Lachashich Alav. Anything I can talk about on Shabbat, I can go to the edge of the Techum to wait for it. So obviously we know, since you can't talk about business, you can't go to the edge of the Techum to wait to hire people for your business, right? That seems to be what he's saying. Now, our Gemara asks, Abba Shaul Ahaya. Which part of the Mishnah was Abba Shaul directly responding to? If he's talking about the beginning of our Mishnah, because the beginning of the Mishnah said you can't go to the edge of the Techum in order to go and bring produce that's beyond the Techum. So you have produce waiting for you outside of the Techum, and you want to have it right after Shabbat. So you go and you wait at the edge of the Techum. As soon as Shabbat is over, you run over and you get the Gemara yesterday, in yesterday's daf, talked about what do you do about Havdalah, what do you do about this? Okay, so somehow you worked it out that you were able to do Havdalah there, whatever the case may be. So you're not allowed to do that. And then Abba Shaul comes along and says, Hi, Kol Shani Zakai Ba'mirato Rashayni B'Hashichato. You're telling me that Abba Shaul's statement, that anything I can talk about, I can go wait at the edge of the Techum in order to do. And what is he referring to? He's referring to this issue at the beginning of the Mishnah that you cannot go to the edge of the Techum to wait to hire workers. Then his language is backwards. What should he have said? Kol she'eni zakai ba'amirato. Anything I can't say, eni rashai b'hashichato. I can't wait at the edge of the Techum, because what is the beginning of the Mishnah saying? It's saying that you're not allowed to wait at the edge of the Techum to go get produce outside the Techum. Why? Because you're not allowed to talk about it. In other words, the two dinim are connected. The two laws are connected. So why does he say it in the positive? Anything I can talk about, I can go to the edge of the Techum. So that's what he should have said, Miba'ele. Ella asefaka. Rather, he's talking about the end. Aval machshichu lishmor umevi perot biado. That he's allowed to go to the edge of the Techum in order to guard his field. In other words, he wants to check his field, so he goes and waits at the end of the Techum. There's nothing wrong with checking the field per se on Shabbat if it's within the Techum. So he's allowed to go to the edge of the Techum, he waits for Shabbat to be over, and then he walks and he looks at the fields, and it says, Umevi perot biado, and if then he decides he wants to bring something back with him, that's fine. So, and then we're saying, then we're saying that Abba Shaul was commenting on that part when he said, anything I can talk about, I can do. But then again, why does Abba Shaul start his statement with talking? In other words, he said, anything I can talk about, I can go to the edge of the Techum for. But the Mishnah didn't talk about that. The Mishnah said, you can go to the edge of the Techum to guard your fruit. So Abba Shaul should have said, anything I can go to the edge of the Techum for, I can talk about. Why does he say anything I can talk about, I can go to the edge of the Techum for? We didn't discuss what you're allowed to talk about on Shabbat. We discussed what you're allowed to go to the edge of the Techum for on Shabbat. That should be the beginning of a sentence. Le'olam asefakei. Rather, what we really, Abba Shaul is referring to the end of the Mishnah. V'Abba Shaul haka'eh. And Abba Shaul is talking about something that's not actually explicitly mentioned in the Mishnah, but is assumed by the Mishnah. Da'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, Mutar la'adam lomar l'chavero shemor li perot shebetchumcha, v'ani eshmor lecha perot shebetchumi. Because Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said that you can do the following. Your friend lives outside the Techum. He lives in another town. You live in a town that has a Techum that extends a certain distance. And you say to your friend, there's some overlap between the two Techumim. So you're able to see your friend, but he can't go as far as where his field is. That's within your Techum, but not his. You can't go, you can see him, you can see each other, but you can't go as far into his Techum as where your fruit is. So you can say to him, hey, on Shabbat, please walk by my field, You can say to him on Shabbat itself, go walk by my field, since I can't walk there today, and check on my field, and I will go walk by your field and check it. And that's okay, because walking by a field is okay on Shabbat. I'm not leaving my Techum, I'm just doing a favor for the other guy. He's not leaving his Techum, he's doing a favor for me.
Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah.
Today, mother life. We live in big cities.
Yeah. Still, well, there is outside. I mean, you can sometimes have between two neighborhoods a lot of empty fields and stuff like that. No residents. Yeah, you gotta have empty residents. I mean, I used to live in Long Island, and we lived in the suburbs, in the quiet suburbs. So we actually had an issue. We had to make an Eruv Techumin. The rabbi did, made an Eruv Techumin every Shabbat, because people who lived in one part of the neighborhood, there was a huge power plant that interrupted the neighborhood. So it was considered the boundary. We left inhabited area. We were walking, and if we walked to the house or the place where they had the minyan, we would be walking 2,000 amot past where the edge of our neighborhood was. So yeah, it definitely still exists sometimes. So he says, so a person could say, watch my fruit in your Techum, I'm going to watch yours in my Techum. Okay, and so what does Abba Shaul say? Ve'ka'amar Abba Shaul Tanakama, Abba Shaul says to the Tanakama, Milo modet demutar adam lomar lachavero shemor perot shebetchumcha v'ani eshmor lecha perot shebetchumi. All right, and so Abba Shaul says to the Tanakama, don't you agree on this principle that you can say to your friend, I'll watch the fruits that you have in my Techum, and you watch the ones that are in your Techum. So then why don't you generalize and say, anything you can discuss on Shabbat, you're allowed to go wait at the edge of the Techum for on Shabbat. Now why is he saying this? Rashi explains. Because according to the Tanakama, you know what you can't do? You can't go, let's say you need to get things for a funeral right after Shabbat. Let's say you need to go get things for a kala, for a bride right after Shabbat. It's a mitzvah. Now, are you allowed to discuss funeral arrangements on Shabbat? You could discuss them because it's a dvar mitzvah. Can you discuss wedding arrangements on Shabbat? Yes, because it's a dvar mitzvah. So he says, if I can talk about it on Shabbat, why can I talk about with my friend that he should watch my fruit and I'll watch his fruit? Because I can talk about it, that means I can also go and wait at the edge of the Techum in order to do it. Right? That's what we said. The two things are connected. Whatever you can talk about, you can do. So Abba Shaul says, so you should also say that if I can talk about a wedding on Shabbat, I can walk to the edge of the Techum in order to prepare for a wedding right after Shabbat. If I can talk about a funeral on Shabbat, I should be able to walk to the edge of the Techum in order to take care of funeral arrangements right after Shabbat. That's what Abba Shaul is saying. He's saying if I can talk about guarding fruit, I can walk to the edge of the Techum to guard fruit. So too with all the other things. And Kalala Tuyemai, what is this general principle going to include? It includes what's taught in the following Braita in Machshichin al techum lavi behema. You can't go to the edge of the techum to bring animals back if your animals strayed beyond the techum. This is talking about animals that would need to be carried. Okay? If the animal is outside of the border, then you can call it to come back to you. But you can't stand at the edge of the border waiting till Shabbat ends to go grab the animals. Since it's something you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, carry the animals, you're not allowed to wait at the edge of the Tuchum to do it. Kelal Amar Abba Shaul. Abba Shaul said a general rule. That anything I'm allowed to discuss on Shabbat, I'm allowed to wait at the edge of the Tuchum to do on Shabbat. And that would not include, obviously he's agreeing, you can't wait for the animal because you're not allowed to carry the animal. So therefore I can wait at the edge of the Techum to take care of wedding arrangements. And the same with funeral arrangements. If I need to go get a coffin or shrouds for the person who died, I'm allowed, since we're allowed to discuss it, I'm allowed to wait at the edge to do it. And you can say to a servant, go to such and such place. If you don't find what you need in place A, go to place B. You didn't find it for a maneh. Actually, you didn't find it for one maneh. Pay 200. A maneh is 100 zuz. Okay, matayim means 200 zuz. So you can even talk prices. You say, oh, if you didn't find it at Bloomingdale's, go to Macy's. You can discuss where you're allowed to buy the wedding dress, let's say. You're allowed to discuss it. If you don't find it for 100, buy it for 200. Okay? And then, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ubilvad shelo yazkelo sechum mekach. You can't mention a sechum mekach. You can't mention a monetary amount. So some people understand that Rabbi Yehuda here is arguing and saying, no, you can't say anything about the price. Right? Because Abba Shaul said, you can say, if you don't find it for 100, buy it for 200. And Rabbi Yehuda is saying, no, you can't mention price. But the Rambam and many of the Rishonim say, no, he's not arguing, he's adding. He's saying, don't set a limit. Don't say, you can buy it, but don't go over $200. Don't set a limit. Why? Because what if he goes now, after Shabbat, you discuss this, he goes, or let's say you sent a non-Jewish guy to do it or whatever. So, or you send you discuss it with a Jewish guy, and he's going to go do it right after Shabbat. So you told him don't pay more than 200. He goes to do it, and what happens? He doesn't find it for less than 200. So the whole discussion ends up being nothing, futile. Or some Rishonim say what it means is not set a maximum amount, but it means don't include it with other things. Like say to the messenger, go buy $100 tachrichim or a coffin $100, and then I'll owe you $500 because I already owe you $400. Because then you're bringing in, another cheshbon. You're bringing in a calculation from something not related to the mitzvah. So don't mention other calculations. So the Shulchan Aruch mentions both things. He says you shouldn't make a cap on the price. You can tell the guy, go buy it, look here, look there. If you don't find it for what you're looking for, pay more. But you can't set a maximum. And you can't say to him, oh, and then I'll owe you, for last week's gardening and also for this. Because then you're adding in other things. So the Mishnah says, this is what we just read. Okay, you're allowed to go to the edge of the Techum and wait for Shabbat to end if you need to take care of wedding arrangements or funeral arrangements. If a non-Jew brought flutes on Shabbat, flutes were used, they used to have music at funerals. Now Jews don't have music at funerals. Only we think of it as a very Christian thing. They play the organ and everything. We don't really have that. But in those days they had dirges that they would sing. Sad music that they would sing. And they would bring flutes to accompany it. So what if a non-Jew brought it on Shabbat? Lo yispod ben Israel, ela imken ba'u mimakom karov. You shouldn't use them unless they came from a close place. Now what we're going to see, what this means is either, it means it didn't come out of the Techum. In other words, he didn't bring it from outside the Techum. Or it means that he brought it from a place such that you could wait just a few minutes after Shabbat and it would have been the same difference. because it was so close that even if he had brought it after Shabbat, it only would have taken 5 minutes to get there, so it's not a problem. And then the Mishnah says, Asulo Aron v'chafru kever yikaver bo Yisrael. Let's say the non-Jews made a coffin on Shabbat, or they dug a grave on Shabbat. You can use it after Shabbat. However, v'im bishvil Yisrael lo yikaver bo olamit. If they made it for a particular Jew, he can never use it. If they made it for the Jew on Shabbat, he can never use it. Okay? So now the Gemara says, Mai mi makom karov. What does it mean to say from a close place? That you can only use the flutes that the non-Jew brought on Shabbat if you brought it from a close place. Rav Amar mi makom karov mamash. Rav says it has to be demonstrable that it came from a close place. In other words, it's not just that we give him the benefit of the doubt. We have to know where it came from. If the guy brought it from a close place, we can use it. If not, we can't. Now, Rashi interprets this all as having to do with techumin, bringing it from outside the techum. Others interpret it as referring to the issue of hotza'ah, of carrying. That if it came from a close place, that it would have only taken him 5 minutes to bring it anyway after Shabbat. So you don't really benefit from the malacha being done on Shabbat. Because what's the difference? You could have brought it after Shabbat, it would have taken 10 minutes. But either way. And Shmuel Amar Chayshinan Shema Chutz L'choma Lanu. That Shmuel says Chayshinan. We wonder, maybe it came from either outside the Techum or was carried here on Shabbat. In other words, what is Shmuel saying? He's saying, if we can give the benefit of the doubt, then you can still use it. If there's a doubt, we can judge positively. We don't have to know for sure that it wasn't transported on Shabbat illegally, so to speak, by the non-Jew. We just have to have plausible deniability, or we have to have a possibility that it wasn't in violation of Shabbat. Our Mishnah seems to support the view of Shmuel. How so? Because because it says that if they made a coffin or dug a grave on Shabbat, then the Jew can be buried in it. Alma misfeka sharei. Hachanami misfeka sharei. It seems like out of doubt it's permitted. So too here, out of doubt, it's permitted. In other words, they made a coffin and they made a grave. Maybe they had in mind for the Jew. You don't know. But since we don't know, we're allowed to use it. So too, since we don't know where these flutes came from, we're allowed to use them. Vetanya kevate de Rav. And there's a Braita that supports the opinion of Rav. If there was a city that had Jews and non-Jews in it, and they have a bathhouse, and in the bathhouse water is heated on Shabbat, if the majority is non-Jews, you can use it right after Shabbat. Even though they heated up the water on Shabbat, potentially it doesn't matter. Imrov Yisrael. If the majority are Jews, then you have to wait the amount of time it would have taken for them to heat the water after Shabbat. Because you're benefiting, because if the majority of people in the town are Jews, even if a non-Jew opened the merchatz, he opened the bathhouse and he heated the water, he's heating it for the majority, which are Jews. Which means the melacha was done for Jews, so you have to wait the amount of time that it would take after Shabbat for that melacha to be done, so you don't benefit from the fact that it was done on Shabbat. Well, that's even on Shabbat. Some people say that. Right. Well, we're talking about after Shabbat. So mechatza, if it's 50-50, then ad kedeshi chamuchamin, you have to also wait the amount of time because it's 50-50. Okay. Now, why is this interpreted as being in accordance with Rav? Because Rav said if it's a doubt whether it was done for Jews or non-Jews, you have to be stringent. If it was a doubt whether Shabbat was violated and the flutes were brought, you have to be stringent. So to here it's saying if it's 50-50, that means it's a doubt. If it's a majority, we know it was done for the majority. If it's 50-50, we say we don't know. And so that's supporting Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, if you have a small pool, like what do they call that, a jacuzzi or something like that. Okay? So im yesh barashut, if there's a big shot around, rochetz bamiyad, then you can bathe in it immediately after Shabbat. So my Rashud, what does it mean? An important person. Amar Rav Yehuda says Amar Rav Yitzchak, in the name of Rav Yitzchak, Bereid Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda said in the name of his own son, he quoted his son's answer, Im yesh ba adam chashuv shesh lo asara avadim shemechabemin lo yud kumkumin bevat achat b'ambate ktana mutar l'chos b'miyad. That what he said was, if there's a guy there who's so important that he has 10 servants, that the 10 servants could have very quickly heated up 10 kumkumin, 10 urns of water or of hot water and poured it into the jacuzzi. So then you can say, you know what? Probably the 10 servants did that as quickly as possible after Shabbat. So it's no problem. I can assume that it was done after Shabbat, and that's why it's hot right away, because he has so many people working for him. I don't have to assume that it was heated on Shabbat. Mm-hmm. Oh, was there one last night? I didn't know.
No, not here. We're talking about Shalom.
Yeah.
The non-Jews come in and probably food is prepared before with all like flour and...
Right, they do the setting up. Right, so they really because since there's two reasons why they permit it. One reason is because they're not doing any real melacha for you. They're just setting up a table and putting flowers and stuff like that. The other reason why they permit it is because they're doing it because it's convenient for them. It's convenient for them to come early. And it would be harder. They would have to hire, let's say, 10 times as many staff if they wanted to be able to do it right after Shabbat. It would be impossible. So they're benefiting not having to do that. It's not the benefit of the Jew. He doesn't care when they set it up, as long as it's done when he gets there. Right. True, but as long as it's done when he gets there, he doesn't care if they set it up after Shabbat or on Shabbat. It doesn't matter. Now, what's the point? So interestingly, Rashi says, and the Gra has on the side, that this interpretation of the Gemara that we just read, there's another text which most of the Rishonim have, including Rashi says it's the correct one, and the Gra also on the side says it's the correct one, in which this discussion is reversed. That the first view that said that our Mishnah supports Shmuel is not in there at all, in the other version. And the other thing that is not there is that instead of interpreting this Braita as in accordance with Rav, it's actually in accordance with Shmuel. Because Rabbi Yehuda is really supporting Shmuel, because Rabbi Yehuda says, if it's possible that maybe the 10 servants of the rich guy did it, then you're allowed to go. And what is Shmuel saying? He's saying, if it's possible that maybe it wasn't really done in Chilul Shabbat, in desecration of Shabbat, then it's okay. So that view, Rashi actually endorses that view. The Gra has that as the correct text. Most of the Rishonim have that as the correct text. That it doesn't mean that it's not supporting Rav, actually, but it's supporting Shmuel, because Rabbi Yehuda's position is supporting Shmuel, because he's saying, if there's any plausible way that this could not have been Chilul Shabbat, you're allowed to assume the best and rely on it. Now the Gemara goes on. So it said, Asulo Aron v'chafrulo kever. So it said that if they made the coffin or the grave for the Jew, so then he's never allowed to use it if it was for the specific Jew. So Amai hachana miyamtin b'chdei sheyasu. Why can't we also just wait the amount of time it would take to build the coffin, or the amount of time that it would take to dig the grave, and use it like any other malacha that a non-Jew does for Jews that you don't want to benefit from? You just have to wait the amount of time it would have taken to do it, right? So why here is he never allowed to use it? So Amar Ula says be'omed ba'asratya. It's talking about where the grave is on a public thoroughfare. Now Rashi says the reason is because Jews would never bury, on a main road. Okay, so when it's done on a main road, we know it's clear that it wasn't initially done for the Jew. So that's why he's allowed to use it. Okay, that's why he's allowed to use it after Shabbat. However, that's before, this is talking about in their time, that now we also have cemeteries on the main road. But they didn't have that back then. Back then they didn't. Okay, so then he says also, so the Gemara says, Tenach kever, that's okay with the kever, but Aron mai, what about the coffin? Ika lememar. What do we say? Rabbi Abba says, B'mutal al kivro. When the coffin is there on that grave that was dug, in other words, it's ready clearly for a non-Jew, it's obvious that it was made for a non-Jew, and that's the reason why it was clearly done without a Jew in mind. So the way that Rashi interprets this is that according to what I just said, which is that the issue here is if it's clearly done for a Jew, that's when it's problematic, and the Jew is not allowed to use it. When it's done for the non-Jew, and it's clear that it was done for a non-Jew, that's when the Jew is allowed to use it. Okay. However, there's a very different interpretation of this in the other Rishonim, and the different interpretation is the one that's taken in the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam, and most of the Rishonim say that what it means is that if it was done very publicly for the Jew. That's the difference. In other words, when it says done on a thoroughfare, or the aron was made in a thoroughfare, what it means is, if it was very conspicuously done for the Jew, then he can never use it. But if it was inconspicuously done, okay, some guy in a workshop made this coffin for Shmulek, and the thing, then it's okay. Or they dug a grave somewhere in Mount Lebanon Cemetery. Nobody knows what is for what. Nobody's there. It's not in the thoroughfare. It's in the middle of the cemetery. They dug it for somebody for today. So there you can wait. If you wait the amount of time it takes for them to complete it. So let's say they dug it on this Shabbat. They dug for somebody a grave. The guys who work at Mount Lebanon. They did it for Mr. Goldstein, some Jewish guy. They knew who it was, but nobody sees it. It's in the middle of the cemetery. So now the funeral is today. So they could have done it this morning. They just didn't want to get up early. So they did it on Shabbat. They wanted to sleep in. So it's okay. But if it was a big deal, it's the Rothschild or something, and everybody sees them working on the coffin, and they make a big tomb right there. So that would be, he would never be able to use it. Because that's, everyone is going to see it, everybody's going to know. And that's what's actually codified in the Shulchan Aruch, that view. Not the way that Rashi is saying it, that when it's clear that it was for a non-Jew, but it's the other way. When it's clear that it was for the Jew, that's when it is a problem, when it's very public. So, and that's the way that it's brought in Shulchan Aruch. Now the new Mishnah says, Osin kol tzorchei hamet, you can do whatever you need to do for a dead person on Shabbat, even though a dead body is muktzeh, by the way. So you can't move the body. However, sachin, you could apply oil to the body. Now, all of this is done so that it doesn't putrefy, so that it doesn't, in an attempt to make it not smell, because they didn't have any refrigeration. They had nothing they could do. It's just decomposing right there. There's nothing they can do. You can wash it. You cannot move it at all. So you have to do all of this very gingerly. You can pull the mattress or the pillows from under him and rest him on the sand, because the pillow or the mattress would give too much heat and would cause the decomposition to happen faster. Put it on the cool sand; it was considered better. I guess there's more air because in the sand, and it prevents that process. So that it won't decompose as quickly. You can tie the jaw, lo sheya'aleh, not to fix it in place, ela shelo yosif, just loosely so that it won't droop anymore. V'chen korashin ishbara, similarly with a beam in a house that breaks. So mechinota besafsal, you can take a bench and put it there to lean against the wall or lean against the roof so that it doesn't droop anymore. Okay, or with the bed leg, so that it doesn't droop anymore. Lo sheta'aleh ela shelo tosif. You can't fix the beam on Shabbat, but you can make sure it doesn't fall anymore. You're allowed to prevent it from falling more by putting something there to support it. So the Gemara says, "V'amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel." Didn't Rav Yehuda say that Shmuel said, that once the students of Rabbi Meir came with him into the bathhouse, the student wanted to wash the floor. Amar lo, he said to him, you're not allowed to wash the floor. He wanted to anoint the floor with oil, which is something they would do. It was a stone floor, by the way, so he wanted to wash it off, or he wanted to put oil on it. And the assumption of the Gemara at this point is, Amar lo ensachin, he said, you can't rub oil on the floor. It would make it more comfortable if there was oil on the floor. And the assumption of the Gemara was that the reason why is because the floor is muktzeh. So just like you're not allowed to put oil on the floor because it's muktzeh, you're not allowed to wash the floor because it's muktzeh, the rocks on the floor, the stone floor is muktzeh, so too you shouldn't be allowed to anoint the dead body on Shabbat or to put water on it because it's muktzeh. So the Gemara says no. That Amar lo, so he said no. So karka b'karka mechalfa, med b'karka lo mechalaf. We're talking about two different things here. When it comes to the ground, what's the concern? If you wash the stone floor or you rub oil on the stone floor, what's going to happen? You're going to end up doing that on a dirt floor. And on a dirt floor, you're going to even out the floor. And evening out the floor is the melacha on Shabbat. However, with a body, nobody's going to say, if I can rub oil on a body, that I'm going to do it on the floor. And I'm going to even out the floor. So it's not a concern. Kol la'atuye mai. It said you can do anything. Kol tzorchei hamet. All of the needs of the dead are allowed to be done. La'atuye had tanu rabbanan, which includes what the rabbis taught. Mevin klem mekar uklem matachot. You can bring cooling vessels. What cooling vessels means is they would put glass vessels that were cool on the body to cool it, and also metal vessels. Manichin al kareso. You put it on the stomach of the dead body, kedei shelo tifoach, so that it won't swell. That would prevent the swelling from happening. And you can also close up the orifices of the body so that air will not go into them. In other words, all of these things were done because they believed that they would prevent it from decomposing as fast. And similarly did Shlomo say in his wisdom, this is from the end of Kohelet, he talks about, it's a beautiful passage at the end of Kohelet. I think it's the second to last parak. Sometimes I can't remember parakim so well because I don't look at it in terms of parakim usually, but it's towards the end. He describes the aging process using a metaphor of like vessels falling apart. And he says, to make the best out of your life before the silver rope snaps. Zechut shidra. What is the silver rope is talking about the spine, before the spine snaps. V'tarutz gulat zahav. And before the golden bowl is smashed. What's that talking about? Ze'amad. This is talking about a person's private parts. Before that doesn't work anymore, you should have kids. Right? Before that system stops working. And v'tishaver kad alamabua, before the bucket breaks at the fountain. Zeh hakeres. This is talking about the stomach. V'narutza galgal elabor, and before the wheel smashes into the pit. Zeh peresh. This is talking about excrement, meaning before your body can't, you have incontinence, basically, that you can't control your bodily functions anymore. And how do we know that perish? V'chenu omer v'zereti perish al penechem perish chagechem. Similarly, perish, the waste of a person. It says in the pasuk that Hashem says, I'm going to spread excrement on your faces, the excrement of your holidays. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, "V'amrei la amar Rav Chaga." Some say it was Rav Chaga. Elu bnei Adam. These are people shemenichim divrei Torah v'osin kol yimehem kechagim. What does Hashem mean when He says, "I'm going to take the excrement of your holidays"? It means these are people who every day is a holiday for them. In other words, all they do is eat and drink and party all the time. They have no purpose in life, and they forget about divrei Torah. They forget about having a meaningful life. And they don't have any connection to anything spiritual. Amar Rabbi Levi, Amar Rav Papi. Rabbi Levi said that Rav Papi said, Amar Rabbi Yoshua, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, Lachar shlosha yamim, kreso nivka'at, v'nofelet lo al panav. After 3 days that a dead body sits there, the stomach explodes and falls on his face. Ve'omeret lo, and says to him, Tol ma shenatata bi, take what you put into me. So that's what the pasuk is saying. Peresh al penechem, the excrement is going to be on your face, which is sort of a way of saying that everything that we invest in our physical enjoyment in this world, in the end, it's just an embarrassment to us or a disgrace because we invest so much, and then at the end of the day, what does it really give you? The physical body, expires, and only the spiritual things live on. So this is and this is what it meant that the stomach is going to fall. Before, when it said that the galgal, where was that pasuk, where it says v'narutza galgal elabor, right? That it said that the wheel is going to go into the pit. That means that the excrement is going to go on his face, right? That's from this pasuk that Kohelet is referring to. Not only the process of falling apart with old age, but also after death, the falling apart continues. The Mishnah says, "Ein ma'atzmin et hamet b'Shabbat." You can't close the eyes of a dead body on Shabbat. V'lo b'chol im yetziat hanefesh, and you can't immediately close the eyes of the dead after they die. In other words, the second you see yetziat hanefesh, the moment that the person dies, you can't close their eyes right away. V'ma'atzim im yetziat hanefesh harei ze shofech damim. And somebody who closes the eyes of the dead, the moment that the soul expires, or that the body expires, it's like they're killing the person. We're going to see why. The Gemara says, the rabbis taught, why is it that if you close the eyes of the dead, the moment that he dies, you're killing the person? It's like a candle, that is in the process of going out. That's true, right? If you see that the flame is smoldering, it's flickering, and you put your hand near it, it's going to go out. So this person is it looks like the person expired, but you can't really be sure. You put your hand over their eyes and you're going to finish them off. So you can't touch them. Tanya, it says in the Braita, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Harotzashit atzmu einav shel met. After Yetziat HaNefesh, we're not talking about at the very moment that the person died, but if you want the eyes of the dead to close, Nofeach lo yayin b'chotemo, you can blow wine into his nose, V'noten shemen ben risei enav, and you can put oil between his eyelashes, v'ochez b'shnei godlei raglav, and you hold his two big toes, and that will automatically make the eyes close by themselves. You won't have to do anything else. You won't have to close them yourself directly. That works as an indirect method of closing the eyes. Tanya, it says also in a Braita, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Tinok ben Yomo, this is a very famous, and continues on the theme of Kohelet here, that a child who's 1 day old, Chai, alive, mechalelin alav et Shabbat. We will violate Shabbat in order to save the life of a 1 day old baby. But David Melech Yisrael met. If the king of Israel, David HaMelech, is dead, en mechalelin alav et Shabbat. We don't do anything to violate Shabbat for him. Tinok ben yom ochai mechalelin alav et Shabbat. Why is it that if a child is only 1 day old, a newborn baby, we can violate Shabbat for them? Amrat Rabba Kazatra says chalel alav Shabbat echad kedei sheyishmor Shabbatot harbeh. Because we say, violate one Shabbat for this child, he's going to keep many Shabbatot in the future. But David Melech Yisrael met, and Mechalin Alav Shabbat, right? We don't violate Shabbat for David Melech Yisrael when he's dead. Kevan shemet Adam, batil min mitzvot. Because we can't say, violate this Shabbat, and he will keep many Shabbatot. He's already dead. So he has no mitzvot anymore. So we can't justify desecrating one Shabbat for the sake of many Shabbatot for a dead person. Vehainu, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and this is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Bametim chofshi. This is a pasuk that comes from Tehillim, that it says Bametim chofshi, that among the dead he's free. Kevan shemet Adam nasa chofshi min mitzvot. That once a person has died, he's free from the mitzvot. That's why it says the dead are free, meaning they don't have any moral obligations anymore, and they don't have any more mitzvot because they don't live in this world. V'tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, and similarly Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said in a Braita, Tinok ben Yom Chayin tzarich lishomro min hachulda min ha'achbarim. A baby who's 1 day old, you don't have to protect him from mice, from weasels. They won't go near it. They're afraid of a living child, even a 1 day old living child. Aval Og melech habashan met, but if Og melech habashan, the biggest guy around, is dead, tzarich lishomro min hachulda min ha'achbarim. You have to protect him from weasels and mice. They'll go and eat the body. Shene'emar, as it says in the pasuk, umorachem v'chitechem yiyeh, that it says your fear and your 2 words for fear, morachem v'chitechem. Your fear and trepidation, or whatever you want to call it, will be upon all of the animals of the field. It says. Kol zman she'adam chai. So they're taking from the word chitchem, sounds like the word chayatchem, right? So as long as you're alive, his fear falls upon other creatures. Kevan shemet batla emato. As soon as he's dead, he has no more power to inspire fear in others. Once a person's dead, they're gone. That's it. Amar Rav Papa says, nakitinan, we have a tradition. Aryeh abetere lo nafil. That a lion will not attack 2 people. How could you say that's a tradition? We've seen many cases where lions do attack 2 people. This is like what Rami Bar Abba said. Because Rami Bar Abba said, "En chaya sholetet ba'adam ad shenidme lo kabehema." A wild animal will only attack a person who seems like an animal to it. Okay, Shenemar, as it says, Adam bikar bal yalin, man will not reside in his splendor. Nimshal ka behemot nidmu. Rashi interprets this nimshal. He will be controlled ka behemot nidmu, when he seems like animals. In other words, if a person conducts himself and seems like an animal, animals will overpower him. If he seems like a human being, animals will not overpower him. This is the explanation for Crocodile Dundee. Clearly, remember Crocodile Dundee? He did this, and animals, because he was a ben Adam. When you're a person, they don't attack you. Amar Rabbi Hanina said, Asur lishon b'bayit yichidi, a person should not sleep in a house alone. V'chol yashen b'bayit yichidi, achazatu lilit. Lilit, the female demon, will attack you if you sleep in a house alone. V'tanya, and we learned in a Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, Aseh ad she'ata motzeh. Do it while you still can. What does that mean? It means give tzedakah while you still have somebody around to whom to give tzedakah. Umatzui lecha, and you have money. Ve'odcha biyadcha, and you're still alive and have the power to do it. In other words, when there's somebody here to receive the tzedakah, you have the money to give, and you're in this world. That's when you should do tzedakah. This is what Shlomo said in his wisdom. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Ad asher lo yavo yemei ra'ah, before the bad days come. What are the bad days? Elo yemei hazikna. These are the days of old age, when you don't have the wherewithal to do things as easily. V'yigiu shanim, this is the pasuk continuing, this is the verse in Kohelet continuing. V'yigiu shanim asher tomar en li b'hem chafetz, and years come that you're going to say, I have no desire in these. That's the verse from Kohelet. Elo yemei HaMashiach. These are the days of Mashiach. She'en b'hem lo zechut v'lo chova. Because there's no zechut and no chova. There's no merit and there's no demerit in the times of Mashiach. Why? Because everybody's going to be doing the right thing. Everyone's going to have baracha and shefa. There's going to be an abundance for everybody. So there's not going to be an opportunity to do mitzvot, to stand out by doing mitzvot. Everyone's going to be doing them. There's not going to be any poverty or any wealth. Well, wait a second. We're going to get to that. Right? We're going to get that. Now, so Rashi explains, Lo davar lezakot bo, shekulam ashirim. Everyone's going to be rich. So what difference does it make if you're rich? What kind of sachar are you going to have? What's your reward going to be? You're going to be rich as everyone else. So it doesn't mean anything. And Chovai says, le'ametz lev v'lekpotz yad. There's not going to be a tendency that you need to overcome, a yetzer hara, an evil inclination not to give tzedakah. So what's the challenge? There's no challenge in Yemot HaMashiach. So do it now. Upligad de Shmuel. And this is in contrast with the opinion of Shmuel. Damar Shmuel says, En ben ha'olam hazeh limot HaMashiach, ela sheyabut malchiot bilvad. That the only difference between now and the Yemot HaMashiach is servitude to other kingdoms. Shnemar ki lo yachdal evyon mikerev haaretz, because it says, there will never not be poor people in the land. There will always be poor people. In other words, the times of Mashiach, according to Shmuel, means a time when the Jews have sovereignty. They're not under the sovereignty of other people. They're not in the diaspora, subject to other cultures. It doesn't mean we're going to live in a utopia where everything is perfect. There will still be poor and rich. There will still be zechut and chova, merit and punishment and all that, according to Shmuel. Now, Tanya, it says in the Braita, Rabbi Elazar Kapar says, Leolam yevakesh adam rachamim al midazo. A person should always ask Hashem for compassion when it comes to poverty. She'im hu lo ba beno, v'im beno lo ba ben beno ba. Because if he doesn't get hit with poverty, his son will. And if his son doesn't, his grandson will. In other words, it's nature. It's part of nature. There's a cycle of, an economic cycle. People who are rich, the next generation might be poor. If you're not poor, maybe if you're poor, maybe the next will be rich. It's a cycle. Shenemar, as it says, ki biglal davar hazeh. Because Hashem says, because for the sake of this thing, and it's talking about poverty and giving tzedakah. Biglal means, Tanad Rabbi Yishmael, the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael taught, galgalhu. Biglal means galgalhu shechozer ba'olam. It's a wheel that turns in the world. In other words, poverty passes around from person to person. You don't have economic stability. A person goes up, a person goes down. Another person is down, they go up. So because of that, it's always fluctuating. Economic circumstances are always fluctuating, so a person should always ask Hashem for help, even if he's doing well now. Amar Rav Yosef says, Nakitinan, we have a tradition. Hai tzurva Rabbanan, lo me'aneh. There will never be a Talmid Chacham, a rabbinical student, who's poor. Really? V'hakach hazenan de me'aneh. Not only did they see that they were poor, we see it too, even today. It's everywhere. Im ita de me'aneh, if it's true that they become poor, ahadurea pitcha lo miadar, they will at least not reach a level where they have to go begging from door to door. They'll be able to be taken care of in a respectable, dignified manner. Amar le Rabbi Chia le divitu. Rabbi Chia said to his wife, Kiate anya, akedimi le rifta. when a poor person comes to the house, very quickly give him bread, right away. Why? So that he one day will be quick to give your children bread when they come to the door begging from him. Amrale, his wife said to him, are you cursing my children? You're telling me that they're going to be poor? You're saying give to the poor so that the poor guy will take care of our children? What are you saying? Amrale said to her, it says in the pasuk, Ki beglala davar hazeh, that for the sake of this thing, V'tana dvei Rabbi Shmuel, they interpreted the word Biglal as Galgal. Galgalu shechozer ba'olam. That it's a wheel that turns in the world. It's a cycle. There are ups and downs. Just because we're doing well today, our son or our grandson's not going to do that well. He's going to need other people. Be nice. It's like they say today in America, what do they call that? Karma, right? What goes around comes around. You're nice to people. Yeah, you're nice to people. So, and one day they're going to come and pay it back. Hopefully. Yeah. True. Tanya, it says in the Braita, Rabban Gamliel b'Rebbe Omer. Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rebbe, said, "Ve'natan lecha rachamim v'richamecha." Okay, v'richamecha v'hirbecha. Actually, that he will give you rachamim, he will give you compassion, v'richamecha v'hirbecha, and he will have mercy on you, and he will increase you. This is the brachot that it's when it lists the brachot. Kol hamerachem ala beriyot. Why does it say he will give you rachamim and he will be compassionate to you? Anybody who is compassionate to others, merachamin alav min hashamayim. Hashem's going to be compassionate to you. V'chol she'eno merachem ala haberiyot en merachamin alav min hashamayim. And anybody who isn't compassionate to others, God forbid, they won't be compassionate to him. And now we go back to the pasuk from Kohelet. Make sure to do things before the sun gets dark. Again, it's using this metaphor. If you open up Kohelet, you'll see at the end this description that the sun gets dark. That you should do this before the sun gets dark, and ve'or, and it says and the light. Zo padachat ve'achotem. This is the forehead and the nose of a person. Vayareach, and it says, and the moon. Zo nishama. This is talking about the soul. Va'kochavim, and the stars. Elo alisatot. It's talking about the cheeks. V'shavu avim achar geshem, and the clouds come after the rain. Zo mor enav shel adam. Sheolech achar bechi. This is the light of the eyes of a person that darkens after crying and suffering a lot. So what's the point? Each one of these things, sun, moon, stars, light, they represent different parts of the body or different parts of the face, different parts of the human being that degenerate over time, basically. Okay, that decline over time with age. And it's saying, make the best out of your youth. Amar Shmuel says, Hai dim'ata, tears that are shed, ad arba'in shenin, until you're 40 years old, hadra, they will be replenished. In other words, whatever liquid you lose from crying and from your suffering, it'll come back. However, mikan ve'lach lo hadra, but after a while, after 40 years, it's not going to come back. Rav Nachman says, Hai kochla ad arba'in shenin marvah. Mikan ve'lach afilu maliyah ka'avisna digirda'e okome mokim arvachelo mavrach. He says that this stuff this salve that they would put in your eye to help your vision, until you're 40 years old, it improves your vision. After 40 years old, even if you put the amount that would go on a weaver's beam, which is a really, really thick, they usually use an applicator that looks like a mascara applicator, those really thin things. But even if you used a huge applicator, still, it will keep your vision, but it won't improve your vision. After 40 years, you can't get any better. Maika mashmalan, what does it try to teach us? Dekama dalim mikochla tefe ma'aleh. That you should use a larger applicator, because he's saying even if you used a beam the size of a weaver's beam, it won't help you, implying that bigger is usually better, and yet it's not going to help you. Rabbi Hanina shachiv lebrate, his daughter died. Lo havakabache, he wasn't crying when his daughter died. Lo kabache Allah, he didn't cry over her. Amrale David, to his wife, said to him, Tarnegolta apikat mi betech. Did you take a chicken out of your house? Betach it should be. Did you expel a chicken from your house? In other words, you're not crying over your own daughter. It's like a chicken died. Amar la, he said to her, Tarte tichla ve'ivara. If I cry over her, then I get two punishments. I lost a child, and I'll lose my eyesight too. I'll go blind. Because they said that the liquid from your eyes won't be replenished after a certain amount of years. It doesn't come back at a certain age. It's like other things, bones don't heal as quickly, the body doesn't heal itself as quickly, and they said the same thing about tears. Kihad Amar Rabbi Yochanan, like what Rabbi Yochanan Savar la Kihad Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He held like what Rabbi Yochanan said, Mishum Rabbi Yosei ben Ketzarta, which was said in the name of Rabbi Yosei ben Ketzarta. Shesh dima'otehen. There are 6 types of tears. Shalosh yafot, shalosh ra'ot. 3 are good, 3 are bad. Shel ashan, v'shel bechi, v'shel bet hakisei. If your eyes are tearing because of smoke, that's no good. V'shel bechi, if you're crying too much, not good. Shel bet hakisei, you're suffering in the bathroom that you're constipated and you can't go. Basically, that's what it's talking about, and you're crying over that. Ra'ot, no good, not good. However, shel sam, if the reason why you're crying is because of medicinal reasons, okay? You took a medicine that makes you cry, or you had to put eye drops in and made you cry. V'shel sechok, or you're laughing so hard that it makes you cry. That's a good type of crying, right? V'shel perot yafot. And if it's because of vegetables, you're cutting onions, or he gives mustard, you're cutting things, and it makes you cry, that's good. So some of it's what it's saying, I think we can interpret this and take it a little bit further and say, really what the Gemara is talking about here is the reason you cry. It's not just a physical thing, but there's a psychological aspect to it as well. When you cry over a lot of tragedy, you cry over suffering and pain, and whether it's with the bathroom or burning, things are burning and that's causing you. So the cause of it, the tears are tears of pain and suffering. So it's what's inside you that makes the difference, whether it's good tears or bad tears. But when you're healing as a result of crying, or when you're crying because you're laughing, so there's joy in your life, but you're crying to the point of, you're laughing to the point of tears, so you have simcha in your life. Or you're cutting onions, why? Because you're cooking, you're enjoying life. These are good tears. So these tears, because they're coming from a good place within your soul, they're healing tears, they're positive tears, and rather than being negative tears. And that's why Rabbi Chanina didn't want to cry over his daughter, because he said, this kind of crying is going to cause me to decline and to have even more suffering over time than other kinds of crying might. Have a great day.